This is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, a podcast and radio program presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan.
Driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
And now, here he is, your host, Jim Ervin.
Baby, I'm home.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much, Parker. I'm Jim Ervin, and this is Time Signatures. The Chicago blues scene in the 1960s and 70s was an incredibly fast-paced time. On any given night, you could catch Muddy Waters, Howlin Wolf, Buddy Guy, Willie Dixon, or a host of other big-name bluesmen on the bandstands of Chicago's clubs. But there were also some young white guys finding their way into the blues circuit, and you've heard about them a few times here already. Paul Butterfield, Mike Bloomfield, Corky Siegel, and many others like them were sitting at the feet of these blues giants, learning all they could about this amazing music. And fortunately for them, the aforementioned bluesmen of the day recognized their passion and respect, and they were welcomed into the fold with open arms. Well, another young man found his way to the Chicago blues scene, and it didn't take long to land a position as the first guitarist with the great Otis Rush, where he played for several years. There's a great deal to talk about here, so let's welcome a man I am honored to have with me today. Ladies and gentlemen, guitarist, bassist, harmonicist, and the originator of the one-man jam and member of the Artist Protection Program. Come on in here, Billy Prewitt, and welcome to Time Signatures. How you doing, buddy?
Thank you, Jim. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well, man. We got so much to talk about here. Now, I can imagine that you've been interviewed countless times, okay? And the questions, I'm sure, feel repetitious to you, but trust me when I tell you that your stories need to be encapsulated, and it's my goal to hopefully find something new to talk about with you today. But first things first, Billy, where did your music and journey in music ultimately begin?
Let me turn my cell phone off. Boy, as a little kid, my parents really never listened to much music. My dad was from Kosciuszko, Mississippi, so he was a real straight kind of guy. And
Sure.
I just started paying attention to music about in high school when I was 15 or 16, in Omaha, Nebraska, of all places. Buddy Miles started there. And that's when I really first became aware of blues. I heard stuff on the radio, Ray Charles and all that, and I said, man, this is some cool music. And my dad was from Mississippi, and he was, sort of a backwards thinker. He was a good dad and provided well, and he was real supportive about everything, but he didn't quite understand why I was listening to Ray Charles and all this stuff on the radio, I said, Dad, this is some really good music. And he goes, well, why do you have to listen to like this gospel stuff? Why don't you there's Pat Boone and stuff like that on the radio. You could listen to nice stuff. And, and the more he didn't understand it, the more into it. And so I started I bought some Jimmy Reed albums at a record store. I was in a corner of a record store, and it was all the straight stuff. And then I saw a little dark corner over in the corner of the record store, and there was Bo Diddley, Red
Yeah.
Fox, Paul Butterfield blues album. I said, what, Paul Butter? This was like, early 60s. And I said, Paul Butterfield, and I turned the album over, and I said, this looks interesting. And I had a bunch of guys sitting on a back porch in Chicago. And so I just brought it all home, Jimmy Reed home. Of course, I was listening to Chuck Berry and all the stuff that was on the radio, too. And so I started listening to all these blues, the original Jimmy Reed, which was 2120 South Michigan Avenue. It's about 5 blocks from where I live here. And of course, I didn't know that stuff then. And so I got into just the sound of the blues. I don't know what it was. It was the magic of just the black blues music really got me off. Just the groove of it all. So that's where I started. That's where I started listening. And so I read the albums, and it says for quite some time. I turned over the Paul Butterfield album. For quite some time, he's been playing at Big John's in Chicago, and I thought, man, Big John's, and that was at North and Wells at the time. And so I thought I better move to Chicago if I'm going to hear some blues. But I was already playing in little little bands, little tree. I had a combo. My mom said, you need a combo. So I was already playing rock and roll in Omaha, but I decided to move to Chicago, and that's where I started listening to all the blues guys in person.
Billy, you mentioned in an earlier interview that you experienced a life-changing moment when you were about 12 years old. So we're going to take a little step back here.
Okay.
When the song Stay came on the radio by
Oh
Maurice
yeah.
Williams.
Oh
Talk
yeah.
about that for me, would you please?
Oh man, that was back in Indianapolis before Omaha,
Okay.
Nebraska. I was my parents sent me to military school, and I came home and I wanted to go to regular high school because there were girls there, and so I bought some albums. I heard I heard "Stay" by Maurice Williams and "Book of Love," the monotones, yip 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 bum bum bum,
Oh, yeah.
and that really caught my ear. And I said, "Man, this is really some cool stuff." So that's what hooked me. And then I was crossed between. I was listening to Everly Brothers at that time too, and the Everly Harmony. I said, "Man, this is all kind of a melting pot." And so between the Everly Harmony and Stay, but when I heard Stay, that's the first time I really got chills. Just where the hair on my arm stood up in the back of my neck, and I said,
Yeah.
"Whoa, man, this is really some down to it." Uh, you know, you know, almost gospel, but I didn't know what gospel was at that time. I was an uneducated kid going to high school, and that's when I really got into it.
Would you say that that moment is where you realize that you were probably destined to be a musician for life?
Oh yeah, I was. Oh yeah. I said, this is something I want to do the rest of my life, and I'm going to do it. Nobody's going to stop me. And of course, my parents says, "Well, you can't even read music. You can't do this." I said, "I don't think I have to, Dad. I can just make stuff up and play." And I already had a guitar. I didn't have my first Stratocaster yet, but I had an old guitar, and I was learning Chuck Berry songs, and I knew three chords, and I said, "Well, geez, I can write stuff around this," which was really Johnny Be Good with different words. But I said, "This is original material," and so my dad said, "You can't hope to make a living doing this," and I said, "Well, I'm going to try." So, that's when I really decided that I got to try this, no matter what.
Indeed. You are, by your own definition, a self-taught musician.
Yeah.
You learned guitar, harmonica, and bass on your own. That really took some dedication, didn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I believe talent is second only to drive. I believe anybody can acquire anything if they do it 1,000 times. You can do it. I think I'm living proof. Because I didn't pick it up and I just magically just started playing. It took a long time. I struggled a lot, but I never had any lessons, so I just had to sit down with the records. And at that time, there was no YouTube. Now you can go on YouTube and they show you the
Oh,
fingering and
yeah.
how to do stuff. But I had to sit down with the records and just just struggle is the only word. People go, "What key are you struggling in?" And I said, "I don't know. What's a key?" But yeah, I just started fooling around, and then I started, oh, I think I got something close. And so that's how I just started doing that. And the harmonica was even harder because there's only 10 notes on a harmonica, and you have to get like 30 out of them. You learn how to bend and all that stuff. So that was really hard for me. But yeah, I just educated myself, and then I started hearing it sounding pretty good, and that's what I ended up bringing to Chicago with me when I started going in these little clubs.
Yes, sir. Now, at the age of 16, you enlisted in the Air Force. You got to see a bit of the
Very
world, I imagine, and experience a little
correct.
bit of life. Did you
Right.
dabble in music while you were serving in the Air Force?
Yeah, I played with some bands, and I used to go to the Airmen's Club. I was
Okay.
16 when I joined the Air Force, and so
Man.
I was an airman, third class. I went to basic training at Lackland Air Force Base, and it's a funny story because I wanted to go. I knew I had to go in the service. So when I was in Omaha, my dad says, you can't read music. Why don't you go in the Air Force or anything and any branch of service, Air Force, Marines, whatever. So I went down to the local shopping center, which had all the little storefronts of, it said join the Marines, a big sign of a guy with his head shaved, and so I kind of looked in there, and they were sitting up stiff, and I said, I don't like that. And so, I went in the army storefront, and it just didn't look appealing to me. And then I saw a little place that says join the Air Force. It was down at the end of the hall with a little flickering neon fluorescent light. And so I walked in that, and this guy, this overweight sergeant, had his feet up on the desk, and he was watching TV with his back to me. And I walked in, and I said, "What is this?" And he turned around, and goes, "Son, this is the Air Force." And I said, "Oh, this sounds." I had my sideburns and my Elvis pompadour, and I said, "Oh, well, can I join the Air Force?" He goes, "Yeah, when I'm done watching, The Price is Right here." And so I said, "Can I?" And he goes, "We see a few guys like you walking around like that." And I said, "Oh, okay, great." And so I said, "Sign me up." So that was it. So I got a paper bag, and my mom put my underwear and some candy bars in there, and I went to Lackland Air Force Base, and that's where I went through basic, and then I ended up at Castle Air Force Base and Vandenberg Air Force Base, and I played guitar in the Airmen's Club, and I knew enough chords by then to get a job with at least
Sure.
the Airmen's Club. I couldn't get in the Officers Club, but the Airmen's Club I could do. So.
And then when you got out, you made a major connection with Wayne Cochran after you moved to Miami. This was a connection that really would alter the trajectory of your life, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that was I had a band called What's Left, and I still hadn't heavily gotten into the blues. So we couldn't think of a name for the band, and we said, geez, we like the Who, but that's not a very good name, and there already is a Who. We said nothing's left, so we named the band What's Left. And our manager at that time got us a job playing at the house as one of the house bands next to Wayne Cochran at a place called the Barn in Miami. And it started at like 9 at night, and it went to about 3 in the morning. And Wayne was doing like 45-minute sets, and then we'd do half-hour sets in between then. And we'd start the night with a little. We were like an English band. We weren't, it was almost like a Beatle copy band. And
Okay.
we'd start playing, and we'd do a half hour, and then the setup was that they'd come on. Wayne had a bunch of horns, and they'd come on and start playing the last song we were playing at the same time without stopping. And the horns would come up one by one, and then pretty soon there was a big horn band, and then we'd leave one by one. And then finally Wayne would come out and he'd do this James Brown thing. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And so I discovered James Brown. I said, I went right to the source, right to the horse's mouth. And that's how I got into James Brown, is at the Barn
Wow.
in Miami. We were young and inexperienced, but we shared the dressing room with Wayne Cochran, and that was interesting. That was a good training ground for me.
Indeed. And from there, you moved to New York, and that was at the Village where you met Paul Butterfield. And as I was reading, Paul was recording the album Keep On Moving, and you met him in the elevator. I've got to hear this story, man.
That was Said I gotta get a job. I gotta figure out this harmonica thing. I gotta get a job, playing guitar. And I hadn't moved to Chicago yet, so I put all my instruments in my Volks. I had a little Volkswagen Beetle Bug, and I said, "Well, I'm leaving all this Wayne Cochran stuff and the Beatle bands, and I'm moving to New York, because that's yeah, I gotta meet Paul, and I gotta uh, go to the village, the village, and I moved to Chicago. I mean, I moved to New York, and got a place at the Albert Hotel. That was the cheapest hotel at the time. It was about $10 a night. And Paul Butterfield and his band was staying there at that time. So I thought, oh man, this is how I can meet him. So maybe I can hang around the studio and everything. So I hung out in the hallway of the Albert Hotel. It's long been since torn down. Uh, but I hung out to ambush him. I waited there for hours, and I came in one night after playing at a place in the village. I think I can't remember the place, but anyway, he came in, and so he walked into the elevator, and I said, "Hey, Paul, my name's Billy Prewitt, and I'm a harmonica player and guitar player, and I was wondering, I thought maybe if I could ask him to hang around the studio." I said, "Do you mind? I know you're recording down the street here, and you're doing that great album." I said, "Do you mind if I'd hang out just in the studio a little bit, and I could just kind of hang around and learn some things. And he goes, no, and the elevator door closed, and that was my encounter with Paul Butterfield. So that was a good. These guys are hard, so I guess I'm not going to get in the studio. And so I just hung around New York and played with some bands, and then I said I got to move to Chicago, and that's when I said I'm gonna pull the trigger and bite the bullet and move to Chicago, and I'm just gonna start hanging around. And as soon as I moved here, there was a place called Mother Blues,
Yeah.
1446 North, and that was the big hideout then. That was the big hangout because that's where I read on the Butterfield album he had been playing at Big John's, which was at North and Wells. So as soon as I got to Chicago, I walked down to North and Wells. There was a big parking lot there, and I said, "Oh man, what?" I asked some people. I said, "Is Big John's around here?" And they said, "Oh, they tore it down. That's the vacant lot." I said, "Oh man." So I went down to Mother Blues, and they had
Wow.
entertainment every night and it was like a $2 cover charge. Every night there was like Muddy Waters, Magic Sam, Howlin Wolf,
Hmm.
uh, uh, every night for like $2. And I got to know Lorraine Blue, which was who they called Mother Blues, and she could see that I was hungry to learn, and so she quit charging me the $2 cover, and I'd go down there every night and just walk in. And um, there's some funny stories on the podcast. I sat in with Wolf, and I played too fast, and he kind of threw me off the stage, and that's a very funny story. That's one of the episodes on my podcast. And I heard Wolf and Magic Sam didn't need any help. He wouldn't let me up. And one night, Otis Rush was playing there, and he was such a clean dressed gentleman. All these blues guys had Wolf would wear these coveralls, these overalls, like he came off the farm, and Otis had a white shirt and a suit and a tie. And I said, man, I said this. So I listened to him for a while, and I said, man, this guy, he's a real blues guy, but he looks like a gentleman. And he came down, and I said, Otis, I don't, I'm a friend. We're going to get the Butterfield experience here, and I said. I'm new in town and I'm a guitar player, and I'd like to, you could probably show me the ropes. And I really didn't know how famous he was at that time. He was already a big star in Europe,
Sure.
and he'd go to Japan, all over Europe. He was a huge star. He had lots of albums, and I thought he was just a local band like Howlin Wolf and Muddy Waters. The bands that played there every night. I said, "This is a cool neighborhood. Man, these are local bands. How cool is this?" So, I asked Otis, I said, do you mind, could I maybe audition for you, and maybe you'd consider, I could be a rhythm guitar player. And so he says, yeah, he's come up last set, and he said, there's my guitar, go up and start the set. And so I played a little bit, and that's another episode on my podcast. I was scared, and I just did my best, and I came down, and Otis said, yeah, would you like to join my band? And I said, yeah. And he goes, okay. He says, we don't rehearse, but it's just blues. Just listen, and I'll kind of show you what to play. And that he says our first gig, which was his next gig, was the first Ann Arbor Blues Festival. That was '69 in Ann Arbor Blues, Michigan. And so that was my first experience in front of 10,000 people. 10,000
Man.
people. There I was in front of 10,000 people. So that
You
was
know,
my training ground. Sam.
yeah, talk about a trial by fire, man. I live about an hour away from Ann Arbor, and
Oh,
I was only four at the time, so I didn't get to go. I didn't get to see it, but I do have a copy of the album. I got a box set down here with the albums and stuff. But everybody was there. I mean, if they were in the blues, if they meant anything to the
yeah.
world of the blues, they were all there. I got to ask you from the perspective of at the time a very very young Billy Prewitt, what was
Yeah.
that experience like for you other than having the crap scared out of you?
It didn't scare me, because I thought, you know, um, when I came to Chicago with Otis and all those guys,
Yeah.
everything I learned was taught to me by black traditional musicians, and I'm proud of that. And they always sense that, and and they always protected me, and I never had any problem about being scared. And I
Well, I guess
was
just the experience, I guess, is what I was referring to, the experience of being in front of 10,000 people.
Oh, that was yeah. That was I just I didn't know what I thought. Man, I'm glad I'm not the leader of the band, because he's got to sing and all that. But that was overwhelming. The first you were 4 in '69. You were 4 years
Yes,
old
sir.
in '69.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I was probably 20, and I just yeah I just it was just that was the first Ann Arbor Blues Festival, so it had never been
Yeah.
before, and nobody knew if anybody was even going to show up. And that was the same year the Woodstock was around
Yeah.
'69. Nobody knew, 500,000 people went to Woodstock. So 10,000 festival. It was over 3 days, I think, and there was all kind, Wolf. Everybody played there. Everybody played there, and
Everybody.
so we were just hanging around backstage. There was no backstage. It was just an open field, and it was overwhelming to me. There's not one picture of that. There's no videos or anything because that was the first one. Nobody came. So if
Man.
anybody has any pictures, that'd be great. I'd love to have a picture of Otis Knight, that first
Well,
one.
I'm hoping to get a chance to interview the gentleman that worked with the Blues Fest. Still, I'm working on that. But you mentioned the trip up there from Chicago, Billy. What was that experience like? Taking your first, I mean, you just joined the band, and here you are, you're taking a road trip with these
Yeah.
guys. What was that like for you?
I'd never hung out with real blues guys,
Right.
My experience was down in Florida and Omaha playing with Beatle bands and all that. And here I am accepted. I really felt accepted, the a black band had accepted me. I remember the first job I played with Otis. Um, local clubs, and they were just little bars. There was a bar and everything, and I never really had any fear. And I remember one night I was playing with Otis at a place on North Avenue, real close to where Big John's used to be, and Otis would always give me like one solo during his set. And so I had to really make it count. And I remember I played this one solo. I played my heart out, and I tried to do good. And Otis looked at me and smiled. And a guy came up to me, and he laid a $5 bill, at my feet, and it was my first tip, and I got $5 for that solo, and I've got it framed in my living room because that was my
You still
first,
have it.
yeah, so I've got it
Wow.
framed. That was an all black crowd of working class people, came up, and here I was, a white boy playing with Otis, and I played a solo, and he accepted me, and that to me, I mean, that's the biggest compliment in the world. I mean, that's better than reading music or anything my dad could say, I mean, I was accepted. And so then I really started digging in and trying to get good playing guitar and harp.
Yes, sir. One more question on Ann Arbor Blues Fest. Do you have any great stories, things that stick out in your mind as something that is a memorable experience while you were there with all of these
Uh,
greats?
Ann Arbor, I was just sitting off stage. We only played the one day. There was 3 days, I think. And I think the day we played Wolf and Muddy played, I think. And people that I'd never heard. I mean, I thought they were local bands. I mean, I didn't know. I had no idea that Otis, was an international star already. I had no idea that Wolf had already recorded Smokestack Lightning and all these classic songs that were brand
Wow.
new to me, and so I was just sitting off stage, watching all this, and I'm going, this stuff really has a cool beat, and I was just, I remember driving up. I remember Otis. Otis was a real sweet man, and he was real introverted, but he used to have panic attacks sometimes. And I remember driving up. We were driving. It was a long ride from Chicago, and I just remember he had to go to the emergency room, and I was riding in Otis's Cadillac. He had a Cadillac, and he put a little U-Haul trailer in the back with the amps and guitars in it. And I was riding with Sam Lay, and Eddie Shaw was in the band, and a couple others. But I remember we had to go to the emergency room on our way up in the hospital, and Otis went in, and we had to sit out in the car for 2 or 3 hours, and then Otis came out, and he goes, "Doctor said I'm okay. Let's go." So that was
Wow.
my. I said, "This is like all musicians to me have a character flaw because they need to be in front of people. Like I think all comedians and all musicians
Sure.
have some kind of shortcoming where they need to try to be great to be accepted. And here I was next to Otis that I didn't know he was an international star. He was just the guy that led the local band to let me play in his band. And that went on for, I was his first permanent guitar player for uh, 4 or 5 years around then. And I was
Four or
his
five.
first
Okay.
permanent. There was one guy before me that was his rhythm player, a guy named Red, I think. And
Okay.
the rumor is I heard that Red used to give him $5 a night to learn from him. And then I came in
Wow.
and I was the permanent guitar player, and I remember for the first 2 or 3 months, Otis would pay me like $5 or $10 appreciation when I was playing and learning, and that was fine with me. And I also remember the very first night that he cut me in and paid me as an equal for the band, and that was monumental to me. And it was the base pay was like $40 a night, and it was fluctuating because if somebody had been with him a long time, they'd get $50, and like I'd get 5 or 10
Right.
bucks, and so I remember the night he gave me $40. And I said, "Wow." And he said, "Go ahead." And he says, "You know what? Don't count it in front of the other band guys because no, everybody got a different pay scale." And so I learned that. I said, "Okay, well that the leader just says how much each guy makes." He'd call. There was landlines then. There was no cell phones. To play the
Sure.
gig, they'd have to call your house and say, we're playing a gig tonight. It's I Spy Lounge and it pays, $50. You want to play? And yeah. And so that's the way it went on for years and years. So I learned the mechanics of real blues from real blues guys in Chicago.
Now, Billy, you mentioned a couple minutes ago that you attended Woodstock, the Woodstock.
Right.
Um, and ironically, I'm wearing this is my piece of stage. This is a piece of the stage from Woodstock,
Okay.
and you
Okay.
can find it at pieceofstage.com. They're not a sponsor. I stumbled on it. It comes with provenance and all kinds of documentation. It's really cool. But I wanted to ask you about that because a friend of mine from down Metro Detroit, Maruga Booker, was playing with a band over there during Woodstock. And so many great bands of that day were there as well as 500,000 people. What was that experience like for you? And were you there for
What?
all 3 days?
No, that was when I was looking for Paul when I was living in New York.
Okay.
Let's see, at that, and I was living I was staying in Long Island somewhere, and so I was close to Woodstock. And
Okay.
I remember I saw all these posters, Woodstock with all the, Hendrix, da 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 da, all the Butterfield, everybody playing. And so I wanted to go there and just see this experience. I had no idea it was going to be an earth-shaking, monumental 500,000 people there. And I had my Beetle bug, and I uh, I decided to. I think it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I think yeah, Hendrix played on Sunday, so I couldn't get it together for the Friday and Saturday. But I thought Sunday I'm gonna go and I'm gonna go to Woodstock and I'm gonna see this experience. So I drove all the way up there, and the closest you could park was about 5, 6 miles away. It was just chaos. It was just
Yeah.
everybody was, the cars were. It was gridlock. And so I got it like 4 or 5 miles from the Woodstock actual scene, and I just parked on the road because everything was gridlocked and there was no people were driving off and parking in the ditches and the
Wow.
farms, and it was all hippies, and I was a hippie. I had bell bottoms and I had hair down here, and
Sure.
so I parked my Volkswagen, and I was with my girlfriend at the time, and so we had sandwiches and stuff. We thought we'd stay for the day, and it was raining, and so I thought, well, so we walked about 2 miles, 3 miles, and as we walked, um, people were coming back just covered with mud, and they goes, you don't want to go down there, it's a mud pit and everything, and I said, I don't care, it's music, I want to see it. And we got closer and closer and closer, and people were just coming back covered with mud. And so we got up to the gate, and it had already thinned out because it was raining, and you saw the films of all the mudslides and everything that was going on. And so the gates had already been crashed, and we were wet and soaked, and I was just, and so we gave up and turned around at that point. But I was on the property, I was at Woodstock, and I was right at the gate, and I wish I'd have stayed because Hendrix didn't play till the next morning. I mean,
Right.
I was about to sit around in the mud for all night and be wet. But I mean, if I would have known the history, I certainly would have. But that
Sure.
was my experience with Woodstock. But I was there, you know.
Yeah, that's cool, man. So after working with Otis Rush and playing about for a bit, you started another band, and this one had personal ties to your own name. I'd love to hear the story behind, what was that Horace Monster? Is that what you called
Yeah,
it?
Horace Monster. That was my rock and roll. I was, you know, I played with Otis for so long, and you know, I stood behind him, and he was a great man, and I finally realized how famous he really was, and it was real flattering. But I still had the fire that, you know, I had real long hair, and I wanted to play rock. I wanted to use Marshall amps. We played. We had two Fender Bassman amps with the old Fender Bassmans with 10-inch speakers, 40 watts, and we turn it all the way up and it would sustain. Use that sound, and I wanted to play rock and roll. So I decided to leave Otis, and who, by the way, Bob Levitz took my place, and he was such a gentleman. He called me and he goes, he heard word everybody wanted to play with Otis Rush, and got the word through the grapevine. He said Billy Prewitt left Otis Rush, man, the gig's open. And so Bob Levitz called me, and I'd never had anybody ask me to have their blessing. He said, "Man, I really want the gig, but if you're going to stay, I don't want to step on your toes." And I said, "No, I want to play rock and roll, and I'm going to start a band." He goes, "Great, can I approach Otis and get the gig?" And I said, "Sure, man. Thanks for calling, you know." And so he approached Otis and asked him, you know, and he ended up playing with Otis for the rest of his life and the rest of Otis's life, you know. Yeah. Anyway, um, but that was nice, Bob Levitz. Anyway, so I got into yeah, Horace Monster was the rock and roll band that was a uh four-piece band in the beginning and then a five-piece. And it was just heavy metal rock and roll. And we played bars and you know, tore it up for 6 or 7 years without a personnel change. And
Wow, that's pretty good. Yeah.
yeah, it was a good little run. Good little run. We were voted the number one of the years we were voted the number one club act by the Chicago Reader in the bar scene, but it was we never really got past bars. And then I started fading back into the blues again, and that's I've gone full circle, you know, and now I'm 100% back in the blues, you know, and
Sure.
you know, I'll be, you know, I want to go out every night and play, but you know, I'll be 81 in August, so it's hard for me to stay up till 3 in the morning. I just can't do it, you know. So I like the little gigs, you know, where you know it's a jam session. You come in at 7, and I can get home and get in bed by 10 o'clock.
There you go. I think you might be just a few days younger than my mother. She was born in August 1st of 45.
Well,
Um, so it was always easy for me to remember name because or her age because she was always 20 years older than me. But you truly did come up in an amazing time, man. You
yeah, I know.
played with and for some of the greatest names in the blues. Billy, what was the single most important life lesson that you gleaned from those experiences with all those musicians?
Boy, that's I don't know. Uh, just do your best and always I've I've learned to surround yourself with people that are better than you because you always learn. You know, you always learn. Some people, you know, I've always been the leader of my bands, and a lot of leaders, they like to surround themselves with people that don't quite have their experience and their knowledge, and that elevates them. But
Sure.
I found that that doesn't that you know you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with, and so if you can put yourself with people that are more experienced than you and know music better than you, they'll bring you up, you know, just like Otis. He just showed me we never rehearsed. And you know, he'd just say the next gig is so and so, and he showed me how to play a shuffle. I had no idea, you know, and a shuffle is you know like a foxtrot, you know, like a horse
Yep.
galloping. And he'd go, no, just play the drums on your guitar. And he taught me all those little things that are you know so hard to learn, and I learned from the masters. So I don't know. I would say just, to try to get better, surround yourself with people that are better than you. Although I love jam sessions and I love, people come up that have no experience and you always encourage them, and you get around people that blow your mind and I'm so humbled to be around anybody that can play. Mike Wheeler and I are really tight. Mike Wheeler's a
Oh, I
great,
love
great player.
Mike. Yeah.
And he's so prolific. He's got, I don't know, 10 or 15 albums already, and he's
Yep.
a great writer. And I met him at the Otis Rush tribute. It was about 10 years ago
Okay.
it was the last show at the Petrillo Bandshell, and that's when I first met him. And he came. We were rehearsing for they had horns and everything. Dick Sherman produced it, and that's the first time I met Mike. And he came in and he was pinch hitting for some of the bands that couldn't fly in that day, and so he was doing the vocals and he was tuning his guitar, and he goes, "Man, you got a tuner?" And I loaned him my tuner, and he tuned up his guitar, and then he sang a song that wasn't even in his key, and I says, "Man, you sound great." And he goes, "Oh, thank you, sir." And then Rich Sherman told him that I was Otis Rush's guitar player, and uh, and then ever since then, he's had a lot of respect for me, and he'd bring me up to play, and we're real tight. I just last Sunday, I he played a duo with his bass player at Buddy Guy's
Yeah.
Legends,
Yeah.
and I just showed up with my harps, and he always brings me up, ladies and gentlemen. He's so polite. Got a blues legend, and he brought me up, and he says we're supposed. He was supposed to play two 40-minute sets between 5 and 7, and I showed up about 5:30, and we were playing, and he said and the audience was being real receptive because Mike's such a great singer. He was playing acoustic guitar, and I just play an acoustic harp. And he says, I never get to play with Billy. We're just going to go through. And he played a 2-hour set, and I had no idea what he was going to do.
Wow.
And so it was hard, but there was a lot of people at Legends early. That was Friday. No, Sunday night. Anyway, there was a
Okay.
lot of people there. They came to see Mike. So it was really nice. He was. I gave him one of my guitars that I used in Horace Monster from 1970 or something, and
Very
you know.
cool.
And
He's
anyway, well,
actually he's going to be here on the 18th. They're doing a fundraiser for the Killer Blues Headstone Project up in Muskegon,
uh,
and Demetria Taylor's coming up to play, and he's
okay.
going to be him and his band are going to be backing her. So, looking forward to seeing Mike. And oh, I love Larry. The man shot out of a cannon all the time.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that's what they've been really tight for,
oh
the
yeah,
story that Mike told me was that uh, that when Mike and him went to high school together, and Mike hadn't put a band together yet. That's a story that I got. And Larry had already been playing. He had his own band, and so Mike wanted to join his band or something like that. And somehow they got together and started playing, and they've been together ever since. And that was, Mike's not as old as me, but they've been real tight ever since, and they can feel
yes
each
sir,
other when they play, when they do acoustic sets. They have such tight band arrangements that it's so impressive. They did all the copy stuff they do is so tight, and Mike does all original stuff. That was, I was playing harp with him through a lot of his original stuff that I had no idea. I didn't do my homework, but I sloshed around the corners and I did just fine. Mike's so humble and he's so generous.
yeah. So going back to my earlier question about the people that you've played with, did you get any?
Okay.
Are there any really good pieces of advice that you collected along the way from some of these big guys?
Um, that they told me,
Yeah.
how, Howlin Wolf was a good lesson. I at Mother Blues, I used to watch him play every night, and one of my podcast things are about that. By the way, my podcast is Talk a Blues Streak, and it's available on every platform, and it's long, little 20-minute programs about just well produced. A guy named Hector Perez uh, said, "Why don't we do a podcast?" Two years ago, and I didn't even know what a podcast was, and I thought it was some kind of radio live radio broadcast and a lot of it is, but he goes, no, let's just do stories about you. Anyway, he, he's the producer, and Linda Milazzo is the executive producer, and they helped me with all that stuff. But anyway, you're saying advice. I went to sit in with Howlin Wolf. I kept asking him if I could sit in, and I was just, this white boy who was a fan who wanted to sit in, and so goes, well, you come up, come up last set, maybe you could do a little something. And so I came up last set, and so he played some real good song, 44 or something, really good song, and I was at that time, I that was before I got the job with Otis. uh, to me, a great guitar player was Mike Bloomfield for Butterfield because he
Oh
was a
yeah.
classic, and Mike Bloomfield was just a barrage of notes like an AK-47. And I always thought the faster you could play, the better you were. That's how you're gauged as a guitar player. Just like when I was 15 in bands, I thought the higher you could sing, the better singer you were. And so I used to play Johnny B. Good. So I thought that if I could sing real high, then I was a good singer. So anyway, my experience was before before I got with Otis, my perception of a great player was Mike Bloomfield, a great blues player because he played so fast. So when Wolf let me come up and play with him, I thought I'm gonna impress him now, and so we started this. I think it was 44, really good traditional blues. Da, 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 da. And he goes, "I'll nod to you when it's time." Da, da, da. And so he nodded to me, and I went, and he just took my arm, and he pushed me off the stage, and he goes, "Let's give him a hand as he leaves the bandstand." So I had the honor of getting thrown off the stage by Howlin Wolf. But the lesson to be learned was to learn spacing and learn pacing and and play the
Yeah.
appropriate part at the appropriate time. And the most important notes are the notes that you don't play. Leave a space, leave a hole, leave that's all in my podcast, the lessons I learned. So it's play the appropriate part, and don't try to play too much, and don't try to be too fancy. Just play the right part, and then people will respect you for playing the right part, not
Yep.
trying to be, Jimi Hendrix plays the blues, which I'm guilty of also. I love my whammy bar and all that stuff, but I try to hold back. So that's one of the lessons.
Billy, where do you feel you fit in the history of the Chicago blues and the genre in general?
I'm not sure. I'm in the artist protection program, so people, they hear Billy Prewitt and they go, "Who?" And well, I'm just some guy that plays. I'm not sure. I never, I never traveled. I never went to Europe with all these guys, and promoted myself. I'm just happy to play and just play wherever I can and do whatever I do. I'm not sure how I'm perceived. And it's fine with me. Sometimes, people have no idea who I am, and I go to jam sessions, and they go, "Whoever you are, go sign the list. You're done. You're number 23. We'll bring you up when it's time." And then other times I go, other times I walk in, and people go, "Come on up." They let me cut in front of the line, because they respect me and they've heard of me. So, I
Right.
don't know. I really don't know where I fit in. I honestly don't. But I'm
Okay.
happy to be a small part of the blues scene, and some people know who I am, and I still have to earn it. I feel I just every day I just play a little guitar and a little harp every day just to keep my chops up, because if I lose my hands now at 80, I'll never get it back. So I'm happy
Right.
just to be around and just try to play a little music here and there.
Looking back over your 7+ decades in music, do you still have some unfinished business, do you think? Are there things you still want to
Yeah.
do? Any
Oh yeah.
musician or musicians you'd still like to play with?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've outlived a lot of them, that I wanted to play with, but
Yes, sir.
everybody, I'd lo- I'd love to play with Clapton or anybody. I mean, Hendrix is long gone, and to me, he was the god of everything. Nobody ever played like him, and nobody ever, when Buddy Miles and I used to hang around, and there's an episode on the podcast about that he was going to take me to introduce Hendrix, and that could have gone somewhere probably. I don't know. But I yeah, I mean there's a lot of stuff that I want to do. The podcast is keeping me going now. It's just little well-produced stories that are about some of the stuff I've done and some of the artists I've been with. Um, we're working on one Freddie King. It'll be out in a couple weeks now. That
Nice.
Freddie King. When I was playing with Otis Rush, a place called the I Spy Lounge one night, Freddie King just walked in the door, and Otis said, "Come on up," and he just went up on the stage, and I played like a couple hours with him, and he showed me some stuff, and he left, and that was I got to play on stage with Freddie King. I mean,
That's cool.
my God, I mean, what is cooler than that, And Otis Rush and these guys, and in their lifetime, I'd like to, yeah, there's a lot of stuff I still want to do. I just want to keep playing as long as I can. It's like
Sure.
Mike said, Mike goes, "Why don't you come out and play?" He calls me all the time. He goes, "I'm checking on you, man. I haven't seen you in a couple of months." I said, "I'm feeling my age, Mike," and he goes, "Well, I'm feeling my age too, but that doesn't stop me. I'm gonna keep going as long as I can." So, um, I don't know. That's all I can do.
You should sneak up to Muskegon for the 18th. You really should.
For
That
that,
would
for
be
the thing that Mike's doing.
yeah, well, it's a fundraiser and he's playing, his band is backing Demetria. I'll send you
Okay.
the information. If you can
Okay.
do it, that
You
would
never
be
know.
so cool, man.
You never
And
know.
I would cover your ticket if you came out. That would be awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So
That's great,
that
man.
that'd be
So
fun.
I don't have to sign the sit-in sheet and come up
No,
20th or
no,
whatever.
no, but I'll make sure if you show up, I'll make sure to put a bug in Mike's ear because
Oh
I
yeah,
think
no, no, Mike.
that'd just be cooler than hell.
Yeah, that would be fun. And Mike,
Yeah.
he loves to play. Like I said, yeah, Sunday at Buddy Guy's, he said, we're just, that was a story I didn't finish. Yeah, we were playing, he did a 2 hour set and he goes, we're supposed to take a break, but I never get to play with Billy. So we're just going to go all the way through till 7:30 or whatever it was, seven.
Wow.
And so I did a 2 hour set with him and the audience was real, real nice. And like I say, people just don't know. He goes, "There's Billy Prewitt, Billy Prewitt." And so when I came off stage, there were a couple of people sitting up front, and I do shameless self promotion. I carry my little business cards around with my gold guitar, my Billy Prewitt, and the people in front. I said, "Oh, here's my business card," and they said, "No, we Googled you while you were playing, man. We know who you are." And I said, "Great," So then. That's great. So some people, you get recognized, but that's not why you do it. You do the music because you love it. It gives me chills when the groove is right.
Yeah.
My favorite changes are no changes. I mean, blues are 1 4 5. It's three chords. It's all but my favorite changes are, smokestack lightning. Songs that just have a groove, and to me, it's the beauty of repetition. That's what Prince said. The beauty of repetition, it's hypnotic. Just the same thing over and over. I can listen to it for 20 minutes, one song. If the groove is right, then you play
Yep.
the harmonica. And if you can give people the chills, then, you did it. And some nights are better than others, but you can't be afraid. You can't be afraid. You just go up and do it. I mean, sometimes you strike lightning and sometimes, you should have stayed home. But, hey, you get what you get. It's only as good. You're only as good as your last performance. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Now, after you turned 80 last year, you said in an interview that your next goal was to make 100. What will you do when you reach that milestone? What do you got planned?
Oh man, I just want to be able to keep playing, and I mean, it's a good gimmick. When they help you up on stage, you get the sympathy applause. Oh look, he doesn't even know where he is. Hey, you kids, am I at the ballpark? What the hell is going? Oh, the audience is here. It's like so. You know, um, but yeah, it's entertaining. I remember at the end I saw Sam Lay and they helped him up on stage. I just went as a and it's just so when somebody's great, and they've been great, even if they're not great at the time. Um, uh, what's his name? Is it Simmons? Is it Bob Simmons? No. Anyway, he just passed away last week. He was a
Okay.
bass player that played and guitar player that played with Carlos Showers all the time, Carlos Flowers, and we play together all the time. But You just remember how great they were when, if they ever did it, if it was ever good in the past, it's still good. It's like some people say, "Oh, I don't like, Sly or something, one of these bands because that's old. And, and if it was ever good, it's still good. Just like the
Yep,
blues, if it's ever good, it's still good. So if you can go up and represent something that you used to do, even though you probably don't have all your chops about you, at least, you're still trying, you're still paying homage, you're still playing, you're still trying to keep the blues alive, you're still respecting it. And, I love the blues because you can play on autopilot, and that's what I like about it. You don't have to think about the changes, you don't have to think about, um, yeah, it's like sometimes the jazz guys look down on blues players because they go, well, you can't read music. You don't even know what you're playing. And I go, I know, but I think it sounds cool, doesn't it? Listen, and they go, yeah, but is that a 64th note? I say, I don't know. I have no idea. But I look at the whammy bar, man, look how cool it sounds, and maybe you'll get the chills a little bit. Uh, so, if you can still represent some of what you used to do when you were young, I think it's valid. But,
indeed.
you know, I don't know. That's if it was ever good, it's still good. If it was good in the past, it's still good. The beauty of repetition. I just like the blues because they over and over and over. I can just go up and just play on autopilot. When the changes are coming, or if there's no changes, it's even better. So
Indeed. Talk a Blues Streak, the complete documentary, is, in my opinion, required viewing if you're a fan of the blues. This program contains an interview with you, hosted by blues
mm,
historian Dick Sherman, and features Chicago Blues Hall of Famer Mike Wheeler, the aforementioned
yeah,
Mike Wheeler, and the
right,
last known interview and final performance with the
yeah,
legendary Sam Lay.
yeah, yeah,
Um, this is the
yeah.
only blues documentary to ever win an Emmy Award. How cool is that?
I know. Can you believe it? I mean, can you believe it? I just thought, I
So
just
much for
wanted
the
to
Artist
know the
Protection Program.
Right, right, right. So I thought, well, I'd like to document some of the stuff I've done, some of the roads I've been down. I think it's kind of valid. So we did it at it's called Rocket Productions, Chicago, and that's where I met Hector Perez, the producer, and he really got into it. I said, I want to do some kind of documentary, just to kind of document stuff. And I had no idea. I thought it was just going to be. A little black and white thing with lousy sound and out of focus. And, at least it's something, when I'm gone, they'll say, oh, yeah, that guy, I remember him a little bit. Um, and so, we decided to do it at a club called, Blues on Halsted. It's right across the street from Kingston
Yes,
Mines.
sir.
And they've been long gone and closed. And I think they're going to tear the building down. But we were,
Ah,
Rich and I said, I want to do a documentary. You want to do it? And he said, sure, because I've known him 50 years. He used to come to see us with Otis Rush, and so he was happy to do that with me. And so the two of us played, and he did the interview, and and we chopped it together and made a documentary. And yeah, it won a regional Emmy, and no blues documentary has ever won an Emmy. So that kind of validates something. I mean, it's got
well, and
some.
and as a blues historian, which is what I'm aspiring to be with this program,
You are already.
as I said, it's required study. I mean, this was a great program that you guys put together. And then, of course, you have the Talk a Blues Streak podcast, which you have shamelessly promoted several times already. I was going to
Yes.
get to it, but I wanted to wait and get to it towards
Thank you.
the end. But these are really cool because unlike a program like Time Signatures, which runs on average 30 to 45 minutes, in this case, we're coming up on an hour.
I'm
But
sorry.
when you,
I
no, no,
I
no, no, no.
apologize.
When you got somebody that likes to talk, I've learned,
Yeah.
especially somebody that has stories like you've got, I'm not going to shut you down. I told you that when we talked about scheduling this in the first place. But I love the approach that you take with this because they're little bite-sized chunks of your own blues history done your
Yeah.
way. And I really have to tell you, man, I'm a fan. I am.
Thank you,
And it
man.
and it looks like this is something you're going to continue to add, yeah?
Yeah, it's the best thing I've ever done. I did my own album with Donny
Sure.
Hathaway, Sam Lay, Phil Upchurch, and
An
that's not
album
my
I
best
still
work.
haven't found yet,
Yeah,
by the
no,
way.
it's out of print. We printed a
Ugh.
hundred copies, and that was it. I know it's out of, but that's not my best work. But Talk a Blue Streak is just really valid. It's just uh, it's just such well-produced stories, and I'm really proud of it. And I'm just trying to leave something behind so that one day, somebody will say, "Oh yeah, that guy, oh yeah, that guy, he did something." Um, and like I say, Mike Wheeler helped me win the Emmy because he narrated a lot of the the uh, the documentary. It's an hour and a half, so if you're gonna watch it, you better make popcorn. Create your own
I just hit the
intermission.
pause button if I need to do something and come back.
Yeah, right. It goes on forever, But
Well, I would like to recommend to you, especially since you're doing these as a preservation step, to consider the Blues Archive at the University of Mississippi. That's where this program gets housed. When we get
oh,
done each season, I send them down to Greg Johnson and the people down there at UMiss, and they preserve this kind of stuff. And I'm telling you, uh, to have those little bite-sized chunks stored and preserved for generations to come, to me would be a no-brainer.
yeah, yeah. Streak is we put a lot of history, a lot of blues history. That's my contribution. That's it's a lot of stuff pays high to everything about how these blues people got to where they were and what they went through. And that's what a documentary should be, I think. So I'm
Yes,
paying
sir.
tribute to all the blues people that I mean that's really valid, and I think it's really important, and you can't do it enough. And there's so much history here in Chicago. And like I say,
Indeed.
the Chess Recording Studios. I like to play the concerts in the afternoon, during the summer. And I guess Muddy's house, they're opening today. That's the grand opening. Was that?
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes,
So
yeah,
yeah, I'm definitely going to want to get over there and check that out. Well,
yeah. It'll probably
Billy,
stop.
where can we send people to learn more about you since you're in the artist protection program
Yeah, right.
and
It's
one
hard.
of the blues best kept secrets? Where can we send people?
That's right. Well, they see, if they see my name in print, they redact it. But they just my website. I try to stay in touch with the website, billyprewitt.com. And that's spelled that's the Mississippi spelling, like Jeannie Pruitt, Prewitt. Most people go Pruit, which is correct too. Billyprewitt.com. That's got links to everything. And I put on the events page, I put all, I'm doing this thing in Vermont this summer. And whenever, I'm flattered when people want me to play. All you got to do is ask nice, and I'll come play. So,
Sure.
uh, I'm happy to play. So anyway, that's the whole history of everything is at billyprewitt.com. But listen to Talk of Blue Streak. That's, it's really well produced. I really owe it to Hector and Linda Milazzo. I mean, it's really valid, because we put a lot of history about
Right.
how those artists got somewhere and everything. And then it's my interaction with them. There's always a tie to Freddie King and Howlin Wolf and James Brown and all these people, Buddy Miles. So it's valid history, and to me, blues is really interesting. Just to, it's to believe. It's like I'm looking at somebody else when I see the what I used to do walking around Old Town in the '60s, and here, all these guys were playing every night in bars. You could just walk in and
Man.
talk to them and listen to them, and I was there. And if only I would have known, what kind of history. I had some idea, but I didn't think it was really, going to happen. I thought the coolest thing ever was the first Paul Butterfield album, and maybe I'd get to go to Big John's and go into the bar and listen to him. So
Well, Billy Pruitt, I want to thank you once again, man. I appreciate
thank you,
your
man.
time, and I thank you so much for allowing me to preserve another slice of blues history with you today. Much appreciation, and I look forward to seeing you perform one of these days. I'll bring my camera. I'm a photographer. I'll bring my camera with me and get some good shots for you. How's that?
That'd be great. Now let's do it again. Can we do it again in another 20 years? I don't know. I don't know if
Absolutely.
I'll make it. I don't know if I'll make it. We'll see. Another 10 years,
All right,
maybe?
sir.
We'll see. All
All
right.
right, sir.
Thanks, Jim.
Well, before we close this episode, I want to talk to you all about the Blues Foundation located in Memphis, Tennessee. The Blues Foundation preserves blues heritage, celebrates blues recording and performance, and expands worldwide awareness of the blues and ensures the future of this uniquely American art form. The Blues Foundation is responsible for the International Blues Challenge, held each year on Beale Street, the annual Blues Music Awards, and the Blues Hall of Fame. Celebrating 46 years, and they're just getting started. To make a tax-deductible donation today, please go to blues.org, then click the donation button near the top right and make your donation. And as always, thank you so much for your consideration. And that wraps up this edition of Time Signatures. Once again, my thanks to our guest, Billy Prewitt, but also to you, for without you, none of this would be possible. Jim Ervin reminding you, keeping the blues alive is everyone's responsibility, but preserving the history of the blues, one story at a time, that's my mission. Until next time, so long, everybody.
This has been Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. For more information on cabs, visit capitalareablues.org. You can find this episode and past episodes at lcconnect.org. The Time Signatures theme song, Michigan Roads, is used by permission and was written by Root Doctor, featuring Freddie Cunningham.
You know I'm trying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
Until next time, keep on keeping the blues alive.